All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. Today we're going inside the notebook with our buddy Benjamin Allbright from KOA out in Denver. Benjamin, how are you, buddy?
Doing pretty well. How are you guys?
Doing good. People often say to Commanders podcast, what a guy from Denver, but Benjamin's one of the most tied-in guys, and he's been coming on the show for several years now. He's been real good with his time. Benjamin, you wrote to us about Eric Bieniemy before anybody had it. You were early last year, as I recall, on Dan Quinn over Ben Johnson fairly early in the process. I'm curious. I had heard rumblings this last year that the Raiders had made an attempt to get up to 2 for Jaden Daniels. Was that true? And did anybody ever hear what they were offering for that pick?
Well, I don't know about the offer, but yeah, Raiders were desperate to try to get up there. They just couldn't find a trade partner, and the problem is the only partner they could find with anybody even willing to engage was at 3, which was one pick too late. For that situation. So I don't know about any formal offer, or even if there was a formal offer. I know that they called to see if they could get up to 1 or 2, and that was an impossibility. 3 was as high as they could get, and once they knew, I think it was probably like late February, pretty much, where the Commanders were locked in on Jaden Daniels. If you go back and look at my tweets from last year, you should see that. That was the point where the Raiders were like, okay, now we gotta figure something else out here. They went and looked at the other quarterbacks, and I don't really think that they really thought that highly of any of the other quarterbacks that weren't already there. Caleb and Jaden were gone. They weren't as high on May and Penix and Nix and all that. So they wound up kind of sitting back, and then they got a stud in Brock Bowers. But they've still got to figure the quarterback situation out this coming year.
We'll get to T. Higgins and some of the news from today. In Commanders land, everybody is curious about Myles Garrett. Is that something that you think eventually happens? And what would it take to get him out of Cleveland?
Well, Cleveland's playing hardball right now. So, everything you're going to hear right now is we're not trading him because, duh. Like, if you say you are, the price goes down, right? So they're going to play hardball. I don't know if they actually move him or not, but they're going to be playing hardball right now. Typically, this next week, Sunday, week from yesterday, I'm leaving for the combine. That's when stuff starts moving on some of these deals if it's going to move. And so, I think I don't. There's not any traction right now as far as that goes. But within the next week or so, maybe we'll see some traction with that kind of thing if it's going to happen. I think in order to move Garrett, you're probably looking at like a 1 and a 2 and then another pick. And given the way that the Commanders played this year, I'm not sure that you want the first rounder this year because it's a glorified second rounder, right? So to me, it feels like it would be like a future 1, maybe this year's 2, a future 1, and another pick. A day 3 type pick, to get it done, that kind of thing, or pick swap to get it done, that kind of thing. You could even see a situation where the Commanders are giving up their first rounder to swap back with Cleveland's second, and then add value. There's some draft value chart stuff you can do to kind of make that stuff work. So again, from my understanding, there's no formal negotiation on that anywhere. Certainly inquiries are in, and you've got, I want to say, 8-9 teams that have serious inquiries in. Of those 8 or 9, I think maybe 5 have the capacity to even be able to pull it off. And so then it becomes how serious are we looking at that point in time? We were talking about the Raiders just a second ago. They are one of the teams I would expect to try to be in on that. The problem is they would have to convince Garrett that they're serious contenders, which Washington would have a leg up on. So, there are some of these teams that are going to be in on that have additional hurdles, but from a fiscal or a cash and cap situation, I would say that there's 5 teams that have realistic intentions here. Washington being one of them.
Are the Eagles one of them?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay.
Got it. Hey, Ben, the wide receiver market seems very interesting to me. It seems like every couple of days another wide receiver pops up or potentially open for trade. T. Higgins got franchise tag today. Stephon Diggs unrestricted free agent. Cooper Kupp's available potentially. Deebo Samuel. I'm just kind of curious, what's your pulse on the wide receiver market? Where's the potential landing spots for these guys?
Well, it's going to be a cash spend wide receiver market. I mean, these guys are going to get paid a lot more than people think. If I know you got the tag, but that's one of those. Hey, don't sign this. This is what we're doing right now, and we'll figure it out. We'll try to get you a deal, and if not, we'll rescind the tag, kind of thing. I don't know that he's going to sign that. So they may still work something out long term. If they don't, they may rescind the tag and let him walk. We'll see how that works. But T. Higgins is a guy who wants $35 million a year, and I mean that's obscene for a wide receiver to me. I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could find a way. I mean, you guys have the cash and cap right now to be able to pull that off, but not a lot of teams do. And you basically have to have a scenario where you've got a rookie quarterback, and you don't have, and you've already got the primary the tackles and the edge rusher taken care of. And I would not suggest that that's necessarily the case. So, with T. I think that what he wants and what the market's going to set for him might be differing numbers. We'll see. He wants, like I said, 35 million minimum. He's looking for like a 4 or 5 year deal, 35 million minimum, with 70 to 80 of that fully guaranteed. And so that's those are absurd numbers, I think. For a wide receiver, there's really like I said, there's like a handful of scenarios where teams can even afford that. Debo, he wants to get paid. It's going to be a little less for him than it would be for T. Honestly, I think he fits better in what Washington does on offense. A lot of what Washington does on offense is put the ball in your playmakers' hands and let them create after the catch. And Debo, who is basically built like a running back but plays wide receiver, certainly that's been his forte. Now the problem with Debo, he's had drop problems, fumble problems. You go back and look at that. I think his his drop rate is the highest in the NFL since he's been in the league. So there's some additional, even though he gives you versatility, he can line up in the backfield, do all that kind of stuff. There are some knocks to his game, and part of the reason that I think San Francisco's willing to let him walk is they try to work something out for Brock Purdy. And the other main ones that are out there, Godwin, we'll see. We'll see what he's able to get, and then Cooper Kupp, who is coming off 2 seasons of brutal injuries and isn't the same player that he used to be. I think Kupp is going to wind up in Kansas City. We'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. The Patriots have put a toe in that water as well. So we'll kind of see, where that goes. The Godwin's kind of the wild card here. I don't really have a pulse on where he winds up. Might wind up back in Tampa if they can work it out. I doubt it, but we'll see. But that's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse when it comes to wide receiver contracts this free agent cycle.
Is the DK Metcalf trade stuff, is that just wild off-season type stuff, or are there any legs to that?
I mean, I think that's floating some stuff to see. I think that he's a fit for what little Kubiak wants to do there. Now that they've got Kubiak in there, Ryan Grubb, what he was trying to run, they didn't do anything to address the interior offensive line, and then schematically they were hanging those guys out to dry. They've really got to fix that interior line, and if they can do that, then the vertical receivers, the guys like DK, can succeed a lot better. Jackson Smith and Jigba kind of came into his own a little bit, so that gives you some flexibility. Do you want to roll with DK, or do you want to move that away? I think they're floating that out there, and let's see what if we chum the water, let's see what happens. But I don't think they're actively trying to offload him or anything.
The other names that we hear come up are George Pickens and Garrett Wilson. Do you think either of those guys find new homes next year?
I don't think Garrett Wilson does. I sticks with the Jets. They're clearing out that Rodgers, that whole Rodgers regime. Devontae Adams will be gone. Garrett will be the guy, and they'll have a quarterback there that can get him the ball. And I think that's a large portion of that is he just was on the outs there, and Rodgers. And once you're on the outs there, I mean, what are you going to do, right? So I don't believe Garrett Wilson gets moved on from. What was the other one? George Pickens? I don't think so. I think Pittsburgh's looking to add a receiver, not subtract one, and that was part of the problem they had last year. They really had they had one pass catching option when he bothered to show up to work, and that was Pickens. The rest of those guys, I mean, it was who's who of what are we doing here? I would not be surprised if the Broncos jettison Cortland Sutton to see Sutton and Pickens pair up on the outside there in Pittsburgh. I don't know. I mean, the ownership wants to keep Russ. I'm not sure that the coaching staff necessarily is on that plan. We'll see. I don't believe it's going to be Fields there, but we'll kind of see how that one shakes out. A lot of that is with the Arthur Smith thing. What you need is those big body contested catch guys that can play along the sideline or run a deep cross. You go back and you look when he was successful in Tennessee, right? And who was catching the football, and it was A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, right? You need those big body guys, and then a tight end that can work underneath. And Freiermuth, I don't know if he's that dude. He kind of was by default, but I don't know if he's the kind of dude they need. So if they add a receiver free agency and then a tight end in the draft, then all of a sudden that Pittsburgh offense looks a little stronger. So the defense is ready to go. They're in their window, and Tomlin and them, they know that the seat's getting warm underneath them. Pittsburgh doesn't move on from coaches very often, but that seat is getting warm under Mike Tomlin. They haven't won a playoff game since before Kyle Shanahan was a head coach. So last time they won a playoff game was before Kyle Shanahan was 28-3, choking 28-3 away.
Wow,
for the Falcons.
Crazy. Jesus. Ben, good question. So we're talking about trades and potential people that are popping up here and there. Do you get a sense of what Washington wants to do? Like, will they be aggressive this offseason? I know we keep talking about the QB contract and the rookie window, but I know at the same token, Adam Peters is a great draft specialist. He's cut his teeth in scouting and so on and so forth. But at San Francisco, he traded for McCaffrey and Trent Williams. Do you think we're going to go for a big trade this year, or do you think he's going to focus more on retaining his draft picks, in your opinion?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think if you can get a Myles Garrett, you roll the dice on that, and you do that. I'll just tell you that Adam Peters comes from, he was in the Denver organization for a long time, and he sort of comes from that philosophy that, first of all, we have different assets. Cap is an asset, draft capital is an asset. So if I'm going to free agency, I'm spending A+ money for B+ talent usually. But if I'm trading for somebody, I'm giving up 2 assets to acquire 1. I'm giving up cap space because I got to sign the guy or pay him, and then I'm giving up draft capital as well. So generally, you don't want to be making trades. And if you're making free agent acquisitions, you're using that as plug and play until you can draft the guy you can find. So, a lot of fans want to see a team be very active in free agency in the trade market. And you may see that to a degree simply because, Washington has a ton of assets right now. But last thing you want to do is hem yourself up by trading all that stuff away or signing a bunch of high-priced free agents. I mean, that's what got Washington in trouble under Dan Snyder back in the day, was spending a bunch of money on free agents and stuff like that. Spend judiciously. Find the kind of guys that you need and keep doing that and improve yourself brick by brick. And so, I think they find guys that they want, that they feel like enhances what they're trying to do. And there's going to be a huge focus on the defensive side of the ball for Washington this year. I mean, you'll look at a receiver, but everything else is pretty much going to be on the defensive side of the ball outside of the offensive line. So I think that, I don't think you're going to see them wheeling and dealing. You're not going to continue to lay the foundation and build brick by brick. Year 1, they got the championship game in year 1. This philosophy is working. You just got to find a way to, to continue that philosophy. The thing about next year is you're not going to sneak up on anybody.
Yeah,
you got to make sure that next year you're continuing to build this thing out, and that the defense next year gets weight. If you're not a powerhouse defense, you're not a Denver or whatever, then you at least need to be capable of generating turnovers and putting the ball back in Jay Daniels' hands so he can go get you a W.
With the left tackle in the draft not really all that strong by the time they'll get to 29, guys like Ronnie Stanley, do you think he will be available, and do you think he fits what they're trying to do there?
I don't know if he's going to be available. He fits. I mean, he gets a few too many penalties, but he fits. I think that they're just going to look and see at the price point, what's out there. They want to home grow some of their guys too. They feel a little bit better, I think, about the offensive line than perhaps the fans do. Part of that is you got a young mobile quarterback back there, right? And that guy moves around and was a tackle. It can make you look bad when you are worse than you are when you got a guy like that trying to make plays with his legs because you don't know how to block it. You notice the offensive line seemed to get better as the season went along, as guys sort of learned where it was that Jaden was going to be and where they needed to block those defenders. So, I mean, I get it. You do want an infusion of talent, but at the same time, I think that they believe that they're growing their guys to a point where they can get there. So I would not say that offensive line is going to be a huge spend. I think there's one position they may, if they get the right guy, they may spend, but I don't think it's going to be a huge spend for them this offseason.
Benjamin, when we talked last year, I was not high on the idea of Bo Nix, seeing him more as the Auburn Bo Nix, maybe. Was I wrong about Nix, or did Peyton do a wonderful job with Nix? Also, I'm curious, I know you were not a huge Peyton fan. How have you felt about the hire since?
Well, I mean, Sean Payton's a smart football guy. I'm not trying to take away from his football acumen. He's created some toxic work environments over the years, and here's no exception. He's a very demanding coach to work for, and so that's one of those things that it's tough. And if you can't handle that environment, then it's going to be tough. I would suggest that. My opinion on Sean Payton, the person, remains the same. My opinion on Bo Nix, I thought he did pretty well. I thought a lot of the criticisms of him coming into this thing were maybe not quite warranted. Although I will say that a lot of what he did was sort of the same things that he did in college. A lot of stuff around the line of scrimmage, and then when when those safeties suck up, trying to hit the deep ball and see what happens. And they had some success with that. They had teams that kind of slept on him a little bit. I don't think that's going to happen next year. I'm not saying that Bo's going to regress or any of that kind of stuff, but I'm not expecting like a huge flying leap forward like a lot of people are projecting. I think that Bo is a good quarterback. He's absolutely a starter in this league. And when he came out in the draft, I compared him to Derek Carr. I maintain that he's athletically, he's better on-field athleticism than Carr. Carr might have had some better better time numbers, but Nix is a better on-field athlete. But overall, roughly, I'd say roughly the same quarterback. It's going to be league. You're never going to mistake him for a top 5 quarterback, but he's going to be top third in the league. He's capable of getting you there if you got a good defense, and they just need to put a run game and a tight end in front of Bo Nix in order to get him going.
Are teams excited about the top 3 quarterbacks this year? Or are they disappointed that this is what they've got to pick from this year?
Oh, disappointed, bitterly disappointed. This is not a good quarterback class at all. In your top 3, I mean, you say top 3. I bet you that probably what most fans would consider top 3 is probably not what the league considers top 3 either. It's pretty split on these guys. I mean, there are guys that love Cam Ward and hate him. There are guys that love Shador and hate him. There are guys that love Jackson Dart and hate him. Those are the top 3. And then, you kind of got these other guys after that, the Jalen Milrose that, maybe he's a fallback as a running back if the quarterback thing doesn't work out. I think the sleepers, the guys like McCord out of Syracuse, but he's kind of just a guy. I mean, he doesn't have elite tools or anything like that. He's kind of one of those guys that's just kind of steady Eddie. Reminds you a little bit of, Teddy Bridgewater. If you can play within himself and you got a conservative game plan, a strong defense, you can win with him. This quarterback class, if you need a quarterback, this ain't the class. I mean, you have to have some very specific fits. It's very, very specific ideas on offense in order to probably make these guys work.
So, Ben, with that, it's definitely a domino effect with the QB carousel, right? So Aaron Rodgers got released from the Jets. There's talk about Matthew Stafford being potentially traded. There's Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix in Atlanta, and Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy in the Vikings in Minnesota. Where do you see those guys potentially moving, especially the more, for instance, I think Minnesota is very polarizing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know if the Stafford thing happens. I mean, a lot of that's dot connecting because his brother-in-law works for the Giants now. So a lot of that's just dot connecting. We'll see. Stafford does want to get paid. He wants one more on the way out the door, that kind of thing. He's had some back and elbow issues over the last couple of years, but he's managed to gut through it. Gutsy player, competitor. And I just can't see Sean McVay letting him go without having the right guy to jump right in there. Now, who would that be? If they did trade that, then you're probably looking at Cousins on a cheap deal, on the Russ deal from this year. And I would suggest a sneaky team to watch out for. If they don't get Brock Purdy paid, Kirk Cousins might be the guy in San Francisco next year too. So keep your eye on that. I don't think Kirk's going to Cleveland. I'm not ruling it out, but I don't think that's happening. That's been something that's been rumored quite a bit. I don't think that's happening. Darnold, I think he winds up with the Raiders. That's kind of been the plan the whole time when Pete was, put this thing together last year in November and talking to people and reaching out. Darnold was kind of the fingers crossed we can get this guy. So we'll see. And that's the thing that the Raiders could very much, bring in Sam Darnold and then turn around and draft Ashton Janney and Quishon Judkins. And all of a sudden that offense starts to look pretty tasty. They still got problems on defense. They only got, two, maybe three players on that defense, but that offense starts to look like something at that point. And, Pete will have the defense at least playing, even if they're a little talent deficient. So, what were the other quarterbacks you mentioned? Rodgers, that's a tough one because I don't know where his landing spot is. Where do you go at that point? You got to have somebody willing to put up with you. Maybe he goes across town in a last ditch effort there with the Giants. Kind of thing. If you could bring him and Devontae Adams in, put them with Malik Neighbors. They got pieces on that offense. It could work. I think the question for Rodgers really becomes what is your market here? Where can you go? Because there's going to be another quarterback on the market too, and that's going to be Derek Carr. And so that's that kind of gives you another question about what are we doing here? Maybe you get another team that jumps into the fray that's a surprise. I think Seattle likes Geno, but if they get a year of Aaron Rodgers, maybe that's something that they look at. He certainly has experience with that offense before with LaFleur. So, it's not unheard of. It's just a really tight market for him. There's just not a lot of spots. And when you look, what are you going to do? You're going to go to Tennessee, or you're going to go, one of those kind of places. Indy. Really. I don't know. The market just really isn't there for Aaron Rodgers.
I can see that. I don't know where Doug went. Doug, you still around? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I am. Is Cousins washed, or was he just not healthy last year? He was coming off the Achilles.
He was still coming back from the
injury. He's a
injury.
little older. Say it again.
Yeah, he was still coming back from the injury. That was one of those things last year when we were in the off season, and I put out a tweet. I later, I later deleted that tweet because I didn't want, I didn't want people to take it the wrong way. But you're talking about Cousins not being ready till well into the season, and the truth was he wasn't. He re-injured himself in the middle of the season, and that's sort of the thing. Washed. I always hate that word because an NFL athlete being washed is still 100 times better than I was on my best day, right? So I kind of hate that term, but at the same time, he can still competently execute them, and we saw it for several weeks during the season. Early on, he still competently. He couldn't move, but he still got that offense. Was high flying for about 6 weeks there. So the question really isn't is he washed. The question is he durable enough to last a season? And if he's not, what are you doing behind him? Because you got to have somebody in there capable of picking up the slack. So. Like I said, he's played in one very specific offense his entire career. It's always been a variant of the Shanahan offense, and so that's really, he's made a fortune doing it. But he's going to have to find one of those kind of offenses to to go to, and there just aren't that many. Like I said, Seattle is sneaky a team that could be in the market for a quarterback if they're saying all the right things about Geno, but I'm not 100% sold on that. So they could sneaky be in the market as well.
Commanders fans are always petrified of the idea of losing Cliff Kingsbury after a really good offensive performance this year. What kind of job do you think it takes to pry him away from Jaden Daniels?
Well, let me say this. I know there were talks about interviews and all that kind of stuff. He was never leaving Washington after this season. He was never doing it. He was taking test the water interviews to keep his name out there, but he was never leaving Washington. He was always coming back for year two. That was always happening. As for those kind of, a job that either has the quarterback in place or has the ability for him to go get his guy, right? Because the two jobs that he's taken, right, or Kyler Murray, where he got to go get his guy, number one, and Jaden Daniels, where they got to go get their guy. And so, it would have to be a job where he can get his quarterback and do his thing. that kind of thing. I think he's also going to want a front office that's a little bit more willing to spend. He took the Arizona job because that was the only people that would give him a job the first time around. But now everybody's kind of seen what he can do, and so he'll have better suitors. The Bidwells are not exactly I'm trying to be nice here. They're frugal. Finding a front office that is willing to spend and has the capability of getting his quarterback or has his quarterback in place, it would take that to pry him away.
Why are franchises still doing this? And we talked last year with the Bears gig, right? Like you have a new quarterback, you bring in a new head coach, like why, or a GM, why are teams still not doing it GM, head coach tied together? It feels like that's not happening as much as it probably should.
Well, the new way to do things is head coaches are hiring GMs now. I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? We've seen that.
Right.
That really took off once when John Elway retired in Denver and Vic Fangio picked out as general manager, on the fly. So we're really starting to see a lot of that. I mean, you look at Liam Cohen taking the Jags job, promised to bring his GM in. You look at most of these jobs. And it really is about, getting to bring your own guy in and do those kinds of things. And so I think that's the new way. Chicago doesn't do that, but at some point they'll come around on that, whether that's Poles getting fired or if the Ben Johnson thing doesn't work out, they'll get on board eventually. There's a few holdouts that still do a top-down structure, but the reality is the more successful teams in the NFL, if we take the Eagles out of the equation for a minute, just because that's such a bizarre deal with Howie and then not being Howie with Chip and then back and all that kind of stuff. The most successful are the coaches and the GMs that are in alignment, that have the same philosophy, that have the same, they come in together. Hey, this is how we're going to do this. We're in alignment on this. We're both committed to the same thing. So there's not a power struggle. And you know how it is. I mean, there's a lot of ego in this business, right? And so a lot of people, everybody wants credit for doing it, and congratulations on having the one staff that doesn't have any ego, man. You got Dan Quinn. I salute our commander in chief. At the top there, and then you've got Adam Peters. And those guys aren't ego guys, man. They're happy to put the credit wherever it is. They know what they're doing successful, and they don't need to, the attaboys, because they're getting them on the field. But the ego is something that is pervasive throughout the league, and when you have that, it can create a schism. You get power struggles, and then people aren't doing what they need to do to to maximize the organization in terms of trying to win. And so, long story short, to answer your question, I don't know why some teams still don't use that structure. Either they don't believe that that's the way to go or whatever, but I have a feeling most teams in the league will be switching to a format where the coaches are kind of picking their general managers rather than the other way around.
All right, Ben, my last one for you. Washington's in the market for an edge rusher. Is there a world where Trey Hendrickson potentially, comes open because of Cincinnati and paying T. Higgins, or does Max Crosby become available this offseason?
Crosby, I do not believe that's going to happen.
Okay.
I just don't.
Okay.
Pete Carroll signed on for that thing. Pete's old. He signed on for that thing for a quick turnaround. They've got a plan, and I think they've got a really good plan. It's just an incredibly tough division, So we'll see how that works out. I don't believe Max Crosby comes free. In fact, I would believe that the Raiders would add an edge rusher before they would subtract Max Crosby. Take that for what you will. As far as Trey Hendrickson goes, a lot of that has to do with figuring out if they can get T on a long-term deal. On the franchise tag, yeah. If they have to franchise him, then yeah, there's just not any which way you could do it. And the problem for the Bengals, really, Joe Burrow went on one of those podcasts and was talking about, well, you can signing bonus up front, or that's super reductive, Joe. Like, the reality is your team does not have a lot of cash, and cash is what you have to do. If you're doing cash signing bonuses, you have to have the first word there is cash. You got to have cash. The Bengals just within the last 5 years sold their stadium naming rights because they didn't have the money to pay Joe Burrow, right? And so it's Paycor now instead of Paul Brown Stadium. And that they didn't want to do that. It's a matter of pride, and so that's the thing. The Bengals just don't have a lot of cash. And in the NFL, if you're going to do the signing, whenever something's guaranteed, it has to be in escrow within 2 weeks. right?
Mm.
So that
Mhm.
lump sum cash has to be in escrow. You can't be out here trying to get a loan or keeping this money in this. It's got to go into escrow within 2 weeks. So you got to have that on hand. And there are just teams that are a bit cash poor that don't have that. Now the Raiders have gotten better about that since they moved to Vegas. The Bengals have just got to find better ways to generate more money to be able to do these things, or they're not going to be able to keep these kinds of teams together because everybody wants to get paid, and that's the thing. So Joe Burrow, I get what he was saying, but it was super reductive. And my problem with it was at no point during that was Joe Burrow like, you know what I'll do? Let me give some of that money back so that we can keep these guys and keep this thing going. And I'm the whole time I'm like, okay, Joe, like you're saying everything except you're going to give up your money, right? Like, everybody else needs to sacrifice, but so and it's not a knock on Joe Burrow. I'm just saying like
Yeah.
it's everybody
real.
wants their slice of the pie, but nobody wants to say, hey, wait a minute, my slice of the pie is making it impossible for you to get a slice.
Mm-hmm.
That cash rip is so important, and I don't think people realize that enough. It was a problem in Washington for years. Like the last bit of Dan Snyder's tenure here, he didn't have any cash, so they like this notion that you could roll in big signing bonuses and get guys was never happening. Benjamin, one more before we get you out of here, and we appreciate the time. The combine is coming up. We just got through with the Senior Bowl. Lots of young guys that are looking to be where you're at are always asking about the best ways to network. Which, in your mind, is the better spot to go to do that sort of thing?
Well, I would say start going to the Senior Bowl. It's more informal. You get closer contact. You're all in the stands together or on the field. I mean, on the field together. Beside you can't help but run into people in a bit of a more informal setting. The combine is a lot more structured, and it's a lot more difficult to network and stuff like that. I mean, unless you're willing to hit the grind and go out late, and really throw down. But there's a lot of teams that don't send the same contingents to the combine that they used to, like the Rams, for instance. But I still find that Prime 47 Steakhouse at 2 a.m. in the morning still a hopping joint there in Indy. So my suggestion as far as networking goes is the same advice I give to people. I used to give to people back in the day when it was it's talking to girls. What's the worst they can say? No, like
Exactly
just
right.
go up and introduce yourself. Go up and introduce yourself and go from there. Worst thing they can do is tell you no, and then you're exactly where you started to begin with, and you've lost nothing. So and don't expect anybody or everybody to open right up. If it was that easy, everybody would be doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that you have to facilitate and build those relationships over years, and not just run to the internet with the first bit of information that you got, because sometimes that's a test. Sometimes guys are saying, hey, I'm gonna trust you with this. Let's see if he goes out there and it opens his big fat mouth. So go out there, network, make friends, be a student of the game, be a student of, be out there to learn things, be humble, be out there to learn things. And, I know I come across an arrogant jackass on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And it's, part of that's me playing a little bit of a character, but the reality is you got to be humble. You're always learning, right? Because if not, younger and hungry is going to come up behind you and they're going to lap you. So, that's the thing. Be humble, learn stuff, and network. Constantly put yourself out there. Try to learn something and try to come out of each situation that you're in, trying to learn one thing and meet one new person. You do that, you'll be fine.
Benjamin, you're the best, buddy. We always
Awesome.
appreciate your time and thank you. We appreciate you.
Thanks,
Oh,
man.
no worries, guys. Take care.
All right.
Hey, Doug, hang on before you jump off.